your Tainus last week, there's always a question when you have a fast. So in Israel, we have the expression "som kal," have an easy fast. But, maybe fasts are not supposed to be easy. The whole idea of a fast is, you suffer. So in my old community of Silver Spring, they invented a phrase. Maybe other people use it too. May you have a meaningful fast. Whether you suffer or not, but it should be a meaningful experience. I hope it was. We, of course, are approaching Tisha B'Av, but it's not. If a person believes in Mashiach, one does not automatically assume there will be a fast on the 9th of Av. Mashiach will come, and as we are told by the Navi Zechariah, that these days of Avelut will become actually not just non-Avelut, but they will actually become days of Sason v'Simcha. They will actually be days of great, great rejoicing, and God willing, we should be zocha to that. What I want to talk about actually is last week's Parsha, because we didn't get to last week's Parsha, and there's some points that are very, very relevant to this period of 3 weeks and the Churban Beis HaMikdash, and that is the story of Pinchus. Pinchus is the vigilante par excellence who takes the law into his own hands, and what happened, you remember, is Bilam tried to curse the Jewish people 3 times. And no matter where he went, no matter what he said or wanted to say, God changed it into a bracha. But Bilam is a very resourceful person. And Bilam realized if plan A doesn't work, in other words, cursing, he has a plan B. And that is, he gave Balak advice to be machshil, to cause the Jewish people to stumble in sin. And at that point, God will take care of them. And indeed what happened was that Balak devised a plan where the daughters of Moab dressed up in a very daughters of Midian rather dressed up in a daughters of Moab actually it's Midian daughters of Moab dressed up, and they were actually it was both Midian and Moab, but it is actually a mixture, and caused the Jewish people to engage in promiscuous relations and idolatry, and there was a massive plague that God sent that consumed 24,000 people, and would have kept on going, but Pinchas stood up and he was zealous for the glory of God, and he publicly killed the head of the tribe of Shimon, who was fornicating with the Midianite woman, and lo and behold, the Mageifa stopped. And then Parshas Pinchas begins that because Pinchas was zealous for the honor of Hashem, God has made a covenant of peace with Pinchas and promised him the eternal priesthood. It's an interesting halachic issue. What do you mean promised him that he would be a Kohen? Pinchas was already a Kohen. So Rashi brings from the Gemara in Zvachim that technically Pinchas was not a Kohen until he killed Zimri. And the reason for that is because you see, the first generation of Kohanim were not born. Aaron was not born a Kohen. He became a Kohen by anointment. And any child that is born after Aaron was anointed would be a Kohen. But Pinchas was born before. So consequently, Pinchas was not born from Elazar when Elazar was a Kohen. Elazar is Aaron's son. And therefore, Pinchas was not a Kohen until he killed Zimri, and he had to be made a Kohen, not by birth. He was a Kohen by direct anointing. Now, why was it so? Why did God defer Pinchas's anointment until after he killed Zimri? Because there's actually a halacha that if a Kohen committed an act of homicide, he is not allowed to do service in the Beit HaMikdash. So as a result, if Pinchas had been a Kohen when he killed Zimri, that would have disqualified him. But Pinchas did his action before he was a Kohen. Therefore, he was not disqualified. This is an answer a number of commentaries give. Halachically, it's very problematical. And the reason why it's problematical is simply this. The rule that a Kohen is disqualified because of an act of homicide is only if it is forbidden homicide, either forbidden or even inadvertent. But when there's a mitzvah to execute, for example, a chayal. If a chayal is fighting a war against the enemies of Am Yisrael, and the chayal happens to be a Kohen and he killed a terrorist, he is not disqualified from the Siyat Kapayim. He's not disqualified from Duchening because what he did was a mitzvah. So if Pinchas had the right to do what he did, it's not clear that it would have disqualified him. But be it as it may, I want to focus on what starts off as a very technical question, but that's a very interesting answer. When Pinchas is described he is described as Pinchas, the son of Elazar, the son of Aaron. Elazar is the son of Aaron. Now that Rashi points out that's unusual because usually we only give a person's father. We don't go back to the grandfather. Why do we go back to Pinchas' grandfather? So Rashi says, because the Shvatim, when the tribe saw what Pinchas did, they said he had no right to do this. Because after all, Elazar himself married, like Moshe, married the daughters of Yisrael. So Pinchas' maternal grandfather had been at one stage in his life an idolater, had been a pagan. He himself had fattened calves, li'avodah zarah. So, who are you, Pinchas? Who are you, Mr. Pinchas, to be such a zealous person against people who are idolatrous? You yourself come from idolatrous stock because your father Elazar married the daughters of Yisrael. So the Torah wants to make the point, well, okay, don't look at his mother's side, look at his father's side, which comes from Aaron. Now this is a very strange answer. First of all, the whole discussion is very, very strange. What possible argument do the tribes have? Well, you come from Yisrael? Well, Yisrael repudiated Avodah Zarah. I mean, the fact that he had one point in his life worshipped Avodah Zarah, how is that a complaint against the legitimacy of Pinchas? Second of all, if there is some type of complaint, then how is that addressed by saying, well, let's not look at the mother's side, let's look at the father's side? Yeah, but there's a mother's side here too. In other words, you're not getting rid of the mother's side by looking at the father's side. So there's a very, very important explanation from the Kesav Sofer. Now the Kesav Sofer was the Chassam Sofer's son. There's some importance to this. The Chassam Sofer was known as a very, very combative opponent of the Reform movement in the early 19th century. Chassam Sofer was a fighter. He was a zealot. Many people, even many great rabbis, considered him to be too extreme in kind of the separation that he took against the Reform movement. The Kesav Sofer obviously followed in his father's ways. But listen to what his thought is. You know, we talked a few weeks ago about the idea that hypocrisy is sometimes a virtue because at least you're acknowledging what a standard is. Alexander Pope said, hypocrisy is the tribute that vice pays to virtue. In other words, sometimes it's good to do the right thing even if you're doing it for the wrong reasons. But there's one big exception to that. If you are going to be a zealot for the glory of God, you have to be acting for God, and you have to be acting out of love for Hashem and love for Am Yisrael. If you're acting out of egotism, if you're acting out of arrogance, if you're acting out of superiority, if you're acting because you want people to fail, you don't have the right to be a zealot for God's glory. So this is what the Shvatim are saying. When the Shvatim are pointing out that Pinchas has idolatrous blood in his background, they're not making the point, oh, you're an idol worshiper. Pinchas is obviously not an idol worshiper. Yisro was not an idol worshiper anymore. But they're basically saying, you know, maybe the reason why you're so fanatically standing up for God is because since you have skeletons in your closet, you need to bolster your reputation. In fact, I can tell you this. I mean, it's almost axiomatic. It's kind of that the most vocal and strident anti-gay activists are almost always closet homosexuals. I mean, it happens to be a fact. I mean, at least in the United States. I mean, J. Edgar Hoover, who railed and railed and railed. I don't know if anyone, maybe the older people remember J. Edgar Hoover. The Americans, he was the first head of the FBI for 50 years. And homosexuals he deemed a criminal subversive class. I mean, he was a homosexual for 50 years. Because the concept is, this is derech hateva, that when you're doing something that you're not supposed to be doing, so to speak, or you have skeletons in your closet, you have to go the other way, the other extreme, to bolster your reputation. So what the Shvatim are saying is, hey Pinchas, you didn't do this for God. You did this because you have this nasty thing in your background, and you need to show that you're a true believer. What the Torah tells me is this. Pinchas had the midah of Aaron. Is it a good translation? When it says Pinchas, the son of Elazar, the son of Aaron, it doesn't mean Pinchas, who is the son of Elazar, and Elazar is the son of Aaron. That's true genealogically. But it means Pinchas had two fathers. Pinchas had a physical father called Elazar, and Pinchas had a spiritual father that is called Aaron. What is Aaron? Aaron, of course, is the midah of Ohev Shalom for Rodev Shalom. The Torah is telling us Pinchas was not a hothead. Pinchas was not a zealot. Pinchas was not a person who's looking to be able to show his spiritual superiority by putting down others. Rather, Pinchas by nature was an Aaron, was an Ohev Shalom, Rodev Shalom. If you want to be a zealot for God, you have to hate what you're doing. Because if you like what you're doing, you shouldn't be doing it. If you like to expose the shortcomings of others, if you like to denounce, if you like to look for the hidden blemishes, then you're in the wrong line of work. I once heard a statement to this effect actually from Avi Weiss. Avi Weiss is quite a controversial rabbi in America, open Orthodox, and I don't want to get into all of the things in which I disagree with him. But he was well known as a big actor, so he was always getting arrested with the Soviet Union. He was demonstrating, and he once said, to be a truly committed activist, you have to hate activism. Because if you love it, it's about getting your name in the papers and getting photographed, and then it's all about feeding your ego. If you hate it, you do what you have to do because it has to be done, not because you like it. Now, I think this is very telling because, as I say, I believe, although the Kesav Sofer does not make a direct autobiographical link, I believe, I have a feeling, I have no proof, he was describing his father. Because mibachutz, the Kesav Sofer looked, you get the impression he was always combative, always denigrating, always criticizing. In point of fact, it came out of love. And Pinchas as well acted not because he hated the enemy. He acted because he loves Am Yisrael, and this is the way he could save them. And that is why there's a paradox that what does God give Pinchas? A covenant of shalom. Now, what is shalom? I mean, what does it mean, a covenant of shalom? That's an obscure formulation. Brisi shalom. It's not even clear what that means, but one of the things it means is that you will have the capacity to bring peace and reconciliation between the Jewish people and God, and peace and reconciliation among Jews. You will have the midah of Aaron. You'll be able to exemplify the midah of Aaron. Now, l'chora, if Pinchas' action was an action of violence, how could it result in shalom? And the short answer is Pinchas' motivation was to bring shalom. And, Rav Chaim Soloveitchik once said that the difference between a true legitimate zealot and an illegitimate zealot is like the relationship of a housewife that buys a cat, or in Yerushalayim you don't have to buy a cat. I don't think anyone buys a cat here. Just pull a cat off the street and kill the mice. Now, the housewife and the cat have a common agenda that if there's mice, we want the cat to catch them. But the difference is, the housewife would be much happier if there were no mice. The cat would be sorely disappointed. A kanoi who acts for the glory of God does not get joy in exposing people's shortcomings. He's not looking around to see what can I find in you that's not 100% kosher. He doesn't go through a 500-page book to find footnote 31 on page 399 as something that Rav Shach disagreed with. The person loves all Jews. The person wants the welfare of everyone. Sometimes you have to take a stand. Sometimes you have to condemn. It's true. But it's done with sadness. And it's done with love. And it's done with care. And you would be much, much happier if that wouldn't have to be done. By contrast, some types of zealousness are like a cat. They look for the mouse to pounce on. So there's a beautiful thought from Rav Kook. Rav Kook, of course, was exactly the opposite. Rav Kook was in fact, this was Rav Kook's, well, there are many points about Rav Kook that are controversial, but among the main points that were controversial was the fact that Rav Kook, almost uniquely among all of the great rabbis of the time, had very, very amicable relations with people who were not only not religious, but leaders who were actively anti-religious. There's a story they tell. Now, somebody told me that this may not be true, so I don't want to say it is a true story, but it is a story that is recorded. That, Eliezer ben Yehuda, Eliezer Perlman, Eliezer ben Yehuda, the founder of Hebrew as a modern spoken language, was not a religious Jew, and in fact he was quite anti-religious in some ways, because he felt that religion was a vestige of the Yiddish-speaking Gola, and part of creating a new state and a new society means that we're not going to be so subject to religion. So in the old Yishuv of Yerushalayim, the pre-state Yishuv of Yerushalayim, he was a persona non grata, meaning people put him in cherem, they excommunicated him, they didn't want to talk to him. He was very, very unwelcome in many religious circles. But Rav Kook befriended him, and in fact, when Eliezer ben Yehuda would comb Gemara and Midrash to find words that he could adapt into modern Hebrew, because a lot of it is based on Talmudic and Midrashic phrases, he would go to Rav Kook to ask what words. He didn't really care what the tochen was, but he wanted to know what the words meant, and he would ask Rav Kook what these different words mean, and then he would, apply it. In fact, if you ever get a copy, maybe you have it, of Eliezer ben Yehuda's dictionary, multi-volume dictionary, it is a very, very fascinating work. It really is an interesting work. You can sit and read it as a dictionary, because he goes through etymologies, and he invented a lot of words. He goes through etymologies, and he quotes the Midrashim and the Zohar and the Gemara, mainly that from Rav Kook, and then he explains how you get from a Talmudic term to a modern Hebrew term. Very, very interesting. It's hard to get. It's a very, very interesting work. But so the story goes that every Erev Shabbat he would go to Rav Kook and talk to Rav Kook for like a half an hour to go over different things. So at one point, Rav Kook said at the end of their conversation in Hebrew, because remember, Eliezer ben Yehuda refused to speak in any other language than Hebrew. He married a woman who didn't know Hebrew, but eventually she learned. He was really a fanatic on this. But Rav Kook said at the end in Ivrit, Rav Kook said, Eliezer, Efshar hazman masot tshuva. Maybe it's time to do tshuva. We've been learning all these years, discussing Lashon HaKodesh. Hazman higia masot tshuva. So Eliezer ben Yehuda said, Efshar shaharav tzodek. Maybe the rabbi is right. That night, Friday night, he died in bed. He had a heart attack. He died. The Levaya was Motzei Shabbat. None of the rabbis went to the Levaya, because except Rav Kook gave a hesped, and the hesped said he believes Eliezer ben Yehuda did tshuva, because when he acknowledged that day, Efshar sharav tzodek, he said Eliezer ben Yehuda died as a Baal tshuva, and as the Rambam says, even if a person does tshuva 1 second before his death, he is a Baal tshuva. And the story goes, Rav Kook actually gave a eulogy for Eliezer ben Yehuda. Okay, but the reason I'm bringing it in, though, is because Rav Kook obviously was the exemplar of the Orev Yisrael, and he has a very beautiful explanation in a keta of the Shemona Esrei. We call the Amidah Shemona Esrei, the 18 blessings. In reality, there are 19 blessings. So the Gemara in Brachos explains that originally the Amidah was 18 blessings, but after the Churban, in the time of Rabban Gamliel in Yavne, he felt the need to include a special blessing, really a curse, against the heretics and the informers that were besieging Am Yisrael. And these are called minim, sectarians. And historians still debate exactly to whom was he directing his anger. Was it to the early Christians who were still operating, or Jews who were still operating within the Jewish framework, and as a result were missionizing, so to speak? Was it Jews that were informing to the Romans? Was it everybody? It's not clear exactly. But he needed to write what was called Birkat Haminim, a blessing against the deviant sectarians, heretics, and informers. But he didn't know how to write the Birkat Haminim. And he didn't know till he finally identified an author who was known as Shmuel HaKatan. Shmuel HaKatan means Shmuel the Humble. And Shmuel HaKatan was a very righteous person. And Shmuel HaKatan is credited with writing the authorship of the Birkat Haminim, which is the 19th blessing of Shemona Esrei. It's not in position 19, but it's the last blessing that was added, and that's the bracha v'lamal shinim, to the informers, al tehi tikva, may there be no hope. Yeah.
If you look at Pirkei Avot, it says Shmuel HaKatan, he says,
so you're mechaven to Rav Kook. That's exactly what Rav Kook says. So the question becomes, I'll explain that. Yeah, but that's very good. The question becomes, what is so special about Shmuel HaKatan, and what is so difficult about Birkat Haminim? What do you mean? Who can write Birkat Haminim? Let Rabbi Gamliel write Birkat Haminim. Well, what is so unusual? I want God to punish and destroy the people that are hurting Am Yisrael. So here's what Rav Kook says. Lamal Shinim is very unique in the Amidah because it is the only bracha that is not a bracha, it is a curse. Every other bracha, we ask God for good things. Give us knowledge, give us the power of tshuva, give us parnasa, give us geula, give us briyot haguf, give us health. Mal Shinim, ask God to destroy. Rav Kook says, when you ask God to punish and destroy, you can't be motivated out of hatred or anger. If you're motivated out of hatred or anger, your prayer is tainted because you don't go to God with hatred and anger. If your motivation is love for the rest of Am Yisrael, love, and you don't want people to suffer, and then you ask God, take away the enemies, that's legitimate. So Rabbi Gamliel's dilemma is the following dilemma. Given the fact that the Jews were suffering so tremendously, who is capable of praying for the destruction of the enemy without taking personal glee and satisfaction in their downfall? It's impossible. If we're praying for the downfall of Adolf Hitler, we will undoubtedly have a glee and a joy in his destruction. And yet, on some level, that's an improper motivation. So, Shmuel HaKatan was the right guy. Why? Exactly what you said. We know very little about Shmuel HaKatan. We know that he was very righteous. In fact, the Gemara says a very beautiful thing. That one time a group of rabbis were sitting, and a voice came from heaven that said, there is one of you in this room that is worthy of the Shekhinah resting on them as it rested on Moshe Rabbeinu. And the Gemara says, everybody in the room looked at Shmuel HaKatan. So obviously, he was extremely saintly. But what is the unique reason that he's given Birkat Haminim? Because in Pirkei Avos, again, just repeating what you already said, in Pirkei Avos, it mentions one statement by Shmuel HaKatan, Shmuel HaKatan, Hu Haya Omer, and it's not even his statement, it's a pasuk in Mishlei. But apparently he said it so many times that it became his personal credo. B'nafal oyevecha, when your enemy suffers his downfall, al tismach, do not take personal glee. Remember, that's what Hashem told the angels when they wanted to sing his praises upon the downfall of Mitzrayim. Rabbi Gamliel said, only a person who internalized the nefal yavecha al tismach, that person can curse the enemy because he's not acting out of hate. He's acting out of love. You know, there's a famous, actually it's an infamous quote. Some people will absolutely hate this, and so I have to preface, I'm going to quote Golda Meir, and it's not my quote, so don't blame me. Golda Meir famously or infamously remarked in the 1970s that we can forgive the Arabs for killing our children, again, chas v'shalom, but this is what she said, we cannot forgive the Arabs for making us kill their children. Now, the first half of the statement I will disassociate myself from. Obviously, we don't forgive the killing of our Jewish children. But I will also say, to her credit, that the second part of the statement has a resonance in Jewish tradition. On one hand, we are not pacifists. Absolutely, we do not turn the other cheek. Haba lahargecha, somebody comes to kill you, or kill another Jew. Hashkem v'harog lo, you take the initiative to kill that enemy first. Absolutely. And this is something that we must do, and it is a mitzvah to do. Okay, for sure. But at the same time, we don't jubilantly celebrate the death and suffering of other human beings, because we recognize.
It's only for Jews.
Huh?
It's only for Jews. Before Oivcha is your private enemies. It's the dictation. I don't know.
Well. Once again, I mean, remember that the Medrash.
Mordechai and Aman, you know. Mordechai says
Yeah.
to Aman, "Al barotem ot tidroch."
Yeah, but you have to understand. Remember that the Gemara quotes the pasuk with regarding the Malachi Yasharet and Mitzrayim, right? So it quoted it by Mitzrayim. B'nafali lechaz, it was said by the Mitzrayim.
But on our on the gravestones, we write Hashem yikom damo.
So again,
Isn't that a?
so you have to understand that the idea is that when enemies kill Jews, when they desecrate Torah, when they bring suffering on Am Yisrael, that is a desecration of God's name, because it looks as if God can't do anything. So we pray that the true motive is that we pray for the sanctification of God's name by showing the world that immorality and evil and cruelty cannot endure. So, and that gives us happiness when God's name is sanctified. It's a complicated psychological dynamic, because it's not personal glee. It's gratitude that God's name has been glorified and the Jewish people have been saved. Now,
This blessing in the Shmoneh Esrei
Yeah.
is for Jews. It's not for enemies without Gentiles or something like that. It's also the Gemara doesn't cite this verse about the Egyptians. I don't think. I think it's a wrong citation.
No. Well, okay. It's either the Gemara does say. Rav Yochanan said, "Ma'aseh yadai tavu bayam, my creatures are drowning in the sea." You should say Shira. For sure, if it's not the Gemara, then it's the Medrash. And the Gemara says the Ma'aseh yadai tavu bayam, and B'nafal Yivacha is quoted. It's quoted. Now I don't remember if it's in the Gemara or the Medrash, but for sure it is quoted. I'll send you the source.
Says, "Wait until they will drown." So then you will.
That's a pshat. Okay, I understand. There are many pshatim. I understand that. But let me just say this. This is not the same as, I'm not suggesting, God forbid, you tolerate evil. Again, you have to fight. Pinchas, killed the people that were doing evil things, even a Jewish person. And we fight and we kill the enemy, and that's the correct response. But it's not a personal glee. It's not a personal glee. This is what Rav Kook said. Now again, there are people who disagree with Rav Kook. But I just want to point out that even when zealousness is a justifiable thing, it has certain costs to a person's character. Chazal tell us that Pinchas lived for a very long time. In fact, Pinchas actually never died. Pinchas eventually morphed and became Eliyahu Hanavi at some point. Eliyahu Hanavi, we know, is the one person who never physically died. He entered Gan Eden alive through the chariot of fire, and he still comes down to earth to do various types of things. But it's very interesting if you look in the book of Malachim, the story of how Eliyahu transferred his authority and his leadership to Elisha. If you recall the general story, because a lot of different events happened. Eliyahu Hanavi is during the reign of Achav. Achav is Melech Yisrael. Achav is a real bad king. And Eliyahu Hanavi has a big showdown at Hara Carmel. Right? The prophets of the Baal build altars, and Eliyahu Hanavi builds an altar. And a phenomenal miracle happens that fire comes down from heaven and consumes the korbanos of Eliyahu Hanavi, and the prophets of the Baal are dancing and singing and yelling and cutting themselves and doing all of their ceremonies, and nothing happened. And this had a tremendous impression on the people. They all bowed down, and they said what we say at the end of Yom Kippur, Hashem Hu Elohim God. So Eliyahu Navi thought he really did a phenomenal job here. And let me point out that there was a Beis HaMikdash in Yerushalayim, so technically bringing korbanos at Mount Carmel was actually an Isser D'Oraisa, but this was Horat Sha'ah. This was a temporary emergency abrogation of the Torah in order to make this great miracle. But what's interesting is, after Eliyahu Navi did this miracle and everybody did Shuvah, Achav told Eliyahu, I'm still going to get you. I'm still going to kill you. I mean, don't think this changes anything. So at this point, Eliyahu Navi actually loses faith in his mission. He runs away into the desert. According to Chesed, he actually goes back to Har Sinai. And he tells Hashem, these people are just no good. They nullify your covenant. They don't listen. They worship idols. We do the greatest miracles, and it has no Rosham on them. It's like one day, it affects them one day, and then they go back. He says, get somebody better. He didn't mean replace him. He said, replace them. Find some other nation that will be faithful to you. He lost faith in his mission. At that point, there's a beautiful dramatic scene in the book of Malachim where there is thunder and fire and earthquakes, and each time it mentions Hashem is not in the fire, Hashem is not in the earthquake, and Hashem is not in the thunder. And then after all of those things, there is what's called a kol d'mama daka, a small, quiet voice. And Hashem's voice is in that small, quiet voice. That itself is an important lesson. Hashem is telling Eliyahu Navi, you're not going to change people, literally, no pun intended, by pyrotechnics, I mean, bringing down the fire, and not by yelling and screaming, but by the small, quiet voice of persuasion and chizuk and building people up. But then, if you go on to the narrative, that is the point at which God said, anoint your successor. Anoint your successor. And the Ran says, same thing happened with Moshe. Because when Moshe hit the rock, Moshe lost faith in the Jewish people, calling them rebellious. The Ran says, when a leader loses faith in the goodness of his people, he can no longer be the leader of Am Yisrael. So Eliyahu Navi is replaced. And in many ways, one might say this started with zealousness, because zealousness is absolutely sometimes necessary. Pinchas' action was 100% meritorious. The Torah says he was given the covenant of peace, he was given kahuna. He did something 100% right. But zealousness trains you to focus on the negative. And when you get trained to focus on the negative, it gets increasingly difficult to see the positives and the good in people, because you've trained yourself to have a critical eye. And as a result, Pinchas becomes the Eliyahu Navi. In fact, the Medrash says the reason why Eliyahu Navi has to go to every bris, has to go, it's not so easy, has to go to every bris, is because he said, these were his words, Es britzcha Pharaoh, they have annulled your covenant. Because he wasn't referring specifically to bris milah, but they don't keep the covenant. Hashem says, oh yeah? You're going to go to every bris and you're going to see that most Jews certainly keep the covenant, etc. Right? So the point basically is, Mark Twain, again, I feel close to Mark Twain, although he was born in the South, he spent his adult years in Hartford, Connecticut. Those were the happiest years of his life. So I'm from Hartford, Connecticut. So his house, he had a beautiful, beautiful house in Hartford, Hartford. So this was a standard class trip that we would take to the Mark Twain house. So Mark Twain, in his youth, had been a river pilot on the Mississippi River. And he describes a very interesting phenomenon. He says the person looks at a river and he sees a beautiful, beautiful current of water. But once you're a pilot, you no longer see it as so beautiful, because you see every type of current, there's a rock here or something here, meaning you're so attuned to seeing every problem that sometimes you lose the sense of beauty that exists. He gave an example of a doctor. This is not the most sneeze, but in this group I wouldn't use it nor samech. He gives that how a doctor views a ballet dancer. So we can watch a ballet dancer, again putting aside the halacha, okay. But whatever, you have a ballet dancer and you see beauty and grace. But let's imagine you're an orthopedic surgeon. So you see, this ligament, I can see that ligament being stretched and torn and strained. And, in some ways, the knowledge of all of the damage that's happening to the body takes away your ability to see the beauty of the experience. This is what Koheles actually means when it says, he who adds knowledge adds grief. Yosef das, Yosef machov. Sometimes the more you're aware of things, the more pain there is. So, one of the costs of kanos is we no longer see the good in others. I mean, I think we can experience this sometimes in the religious secular wars that seem to predominate Israel even more than the Arab-Israeli wars. You get more and more into a situation where, like, neither side, and particularly the religious side, sees nothing redeeming in the sacrifices and in the different things that even secular Jews contribute to the state of Israel, the building up of the state, the infrastructure, the army, the risking of lives. These are sacrifices, these are contributions, these are great achievements. And yes, I can be very, very sad that someone is not keeping Shabbat and not keeping Kashrut, and that's very sad, and it's something I would hope to be a good influence on. But does that mean I can't see the good that they're doing? Does that mean I have to be totally blind to only see the negative? And I've mentioned this before, I probably mention almost every year, the verse in Mishlei, Kamayim upanim. Just like water reflects the face that you show it, the heart of a person reflects that which you show that person. I show a person love, they will love me. I show a person hatred, they will hate me. They will reflect back what I show. So this is the cost of kanot. Kanot is a cost because you're so hypercritical that you no longer see the good. And by the way, this can apply in many areas. This can apply to our marriages. This can apply to our parenting. We're so focused on that which is wrong. It's like a child. Let's say you went away for the night, and your child decided to wash the dishes for you. And they worked hard, but they didn't do a great job because there might be a kid. So you go back, and the only thing you notice is, why didn't you take care of that stain? But what about everything else? So this is the cost of kanos, and I would speculate that perhaps even Eliyahu Hanavi suffered from this, because that is the point, that he is relieved of his duty, as was Moshe Rabbeinu himself. Now I understand there are counter arguments. Well, if you turn a blind eye to evil, you become an accomplice. Again, it's a difficult balance, meaning you try to work for the betterment of things, but you don't take away seeing the good in what people try to do. And once again, that's what Rav Kook did, right? Rav Kook looked at secular Zionists. He looked at people, again, not just not religious, people who were even actively anti-religious, and he saw, number one, he appreciated the contributions they were making, and number two, this is even more controversial, he saw even their anti-religion in a positive aspect, because he said the problem was that religion was becoming too superficial, and it was becoming too mechanical, and by having to deal with the challenge of those who were rebelling, that forced religion to discover new depths of spontaneity and feeling. Okay, that really got him in trouble. That got him in trouble even more than the Zionism issue. But that's the type of worldview that Rav Kook had. Now, some people say he was Pollyannish, he was too optimistic, he was too hopeful. But, I think ultimately you got to kind of bet on hope, I think, because that's the only hope is to be hopeful. What do they say? The only rational thing in Eretz Yisrael is to believe in miracles. Not to believe in miracles is irrational in this land, and that's true in many, many areas. Let me point out another aspect of this, that, there's a very interesting Gemara. It's a Gemara. When Haman makes the decree against the Jews and Mordechai gets wind of it, so the language of the Megillah is Vayizak Zaka Mordechai emitted a loud and bitter cry. Chazal, with their very unerring instinct, for wherever the expressions appear elsewhere, point out that this lashon appears only one other place in Tanakh, and that is when Yaakov took the blessings away from Esav, and Esav shows up with the meat that he prepared for his father, and his father tells him, "Sorry, I already gave the brachos away." The pasuk says the same words, "Vayizak zaka gedola umar." It's not 100%. One is vayizak, one is vayitzak. That Chazal do not explain the difference, but it is 99% the same, except for that one letter. So you know what the Gemara in Megillah says? The Gemara in Megillah says a peculiar thing. Because of the pain that Yaakov caused Esav, the descendant of Esav, which is Amalek Haman, causes the descendant of Yaakov to have the same pain, the same magnitude of suffering. The same lashon is used because you're supposed to connect the two events. Now, tonight we're not going to discuss what was Yaakov's justification for what he did, but it's generally assumed that, Yaakov was supposed to get the brachos. This is the way it's supposed to be. Yaakov justifiably did what he did. If that is the case, then why would there be this consequence? So Rav Chaim Shmulevitz, the great Rosh Yeshiva of Mir, who, by the way, was a man of extraordinary ethical sensitivity. Again, I know sometimes in the Haredi world, we disassociate. He was a person of great, great emotion and feeling and love for every Jew. In fact, just as an aside, my favorite Rav Chaim Shmulevitz story, it's such a cute story, is that a guy in Mir got married, and he went to the Rosh Yeshiva and he said, the Rambam says a Talmid Chacham shouldn't do work in public, shouldn't do disrespectful work in a public manner. Now my wife asks me to take out the garbage every morning, and I feel that it's not covered HaTorah for me to do such a thing. It's not dignified. Talmid Chacham shouldn't do these things. So Chaim Shmulevitz said, you're right. A man of your stature, shouldn't do these types of things. So the next morning, 6:30 in the morning, there's a knock on this Avreich's door, and Rav Chaim Shmulevitz is in the door. So the person is taken aback, says, "I'm very honored to have the Rosh Yeshiva, but what can I do for you?" The Rosh Yeshiva said, "Well, I've come to take out your garbage because I know a man of your stature shouldn't be doing such things." That's a wonderful little story. But Rav Chaim Shmulevitz says, Rav Chaim Shmulevitz says, when you cause pain to other people, even if you have justification, it's going to come back to haunt you because it's a law of nature. It's a law of spiritual nature. The analogy would be, if I run into a fiery building to rescue a baby, I've done the right thing. I've done a wonderful thing. But that doesn't immunize me from getting burnt. Maybe there'll be a miracle. In other words, the rectitude of an action does not, in other words, the correctness of an action does not automatically immunize yourself from negative consequences. And he says, the same way that there's a physical law, that when you play with fire you get burnt, no matter how justifiable your intervention was. When you cause pain to other people, there's kind of a cosmic payback that comes back to haunt you. Now, sometimes you must be willing to take that cost because it's very important that you do it. But you need to think twice. Don't just say, I'm acting l'shem shamayim, so I'm going to be protected. It's not an insurance policy, because Yaakov also acted l'shem shamayim. Again, the bottom line is that one should be very, very wary of making judgments that I have the right to hurt people in any way. Sometimes I must. Sometimes I must indeed. But there's often going to be a cosmic cost. And of course, overall, we're in the 3 weeks. On the 3 weeks, we think about the district course. We're supposed to think about the Beit HaMikdash all the time. This is a period that's more focused on thinking about Churban. And we know, of course, the famous Gemara that all of you are familiar with, that the first temple was destroyed because of the worst Aveirot, Avodah Zarah, Gilui Arayot. sexual immorality, murder. But that only lasted 70 years. 70 years. After that, we built the second Beit HaMikdash. The second Beit HaMikdash, the Jews were largely observant. And the Gemara says it was destroyed because of sinas chinam, irrational, groundless hatred. And the Gemara in Yuma says, look how long that golus lasted. That was more than 1,000 years ago when the Gemara said the statement, right? And we're still in it, which means sinat chinam is even worse than avodah zarah, gilei raya, shvichus damim, sinat chinam. Now, in Netziv, the great Rosh Yeshiva of Volozhin, which was really, Volozhin was it's called Aim HaYeshivot. It's the mother of the yeshivot. It was the mother of Slobodka and Mir and Telz and all of the great yeshivot in Europe. So the Netziv was the Rosh Yeshiva for the greatest period of Volozhin's history, 50 years. He married the granddaughter of Rav Chaim of Volozhin, who was the founder of the yeshiva, the Vilna Gaon's Talmud. The Netziv writes, what do we mean by sinat chinam? In a sense, if I were to go over to you and say, why do you hate somebody? You wouldn't say, no reason. Everybody has a reason. I mean, in other words, what does it mean? I hate somebody for no reason. That's not what a person thinks. I don't think there's no reason. I think there's a reason. The answer must be that even when you think there's a reason, it is chinam by definition. It's not a good enough reason. And he says the following. He says, what was the sinat chinam of the Bayit Sheni? The Netziv says an amazing thought. In the Bayit Sheni, there were many different sects and gradations of how to practice Judaism. And each sect and grouping looked at the other sect and said, you're an apikoris, you're a kofir, you're a heretic. It's like the old saying, anybody to the right of me is a fanatic, and anybody to the left of me is an apikoris. I'm in the right place. And the Netziv says, the sinat chinam of the Bayit Sheni was a form of religious triumphalism. Now, I have to say, the Netziv was attacked for that statement. In and of itself, he was attacked because the Netziv was really addressing the situation. In fact, it's no accident that Rav Kook regarded the Netziv as his Rebbe. Of all of the Netziv was the early influence on Rav Kook because they were very much the same in a number of things. And as Rav Kook was attacked, the Netziv was attacked, although not with the same vehemence as Rav Kook was later attacked. But the Netziv basically said that this religious triumphalism, that I'm better than you, is the sinat chinam. Now, little historical note, I would say that Josephus probably would disagree with the Netziv's definition. If you look in Josephus defines the sinat chinam of the Gemara in quite a literal way. He talks about the fact that within Jerusalem itself, there were many, many different groups as to how you deal with Rome. There were the Zealots who wanted to fight against Rome. There were the pacifists, which mainly were the sages who wanted to make peace with Rome. And Josephus describes the scene, which is unbelievable. He describes a scene of civil war among Jewish groups in Yerushalayim, in the Beis HaMikdash itself. He describes a scene. Now, he was not there. He was already on the Roman side, but he's aware of it at least. I don't know if I don't think he could have seen it. In which one side was shooting arrows and spears at the other side, and the Kohanim were walking under the barrage of spears to bring korbanos. Imagine, you're in the Beis HaMikdash, you have bullets whizzing around, and you're crawling under the bullets to bring the korbanos. That's the sinat chinam. And Josephus quotes Titus. Now, everyone knows Josephus was living under the protection of Rome, so consequently, all of the positive statements he makes about Titus have to be taken with an extreme grain of salt. But I think there's a ring of truth here. He quotes Titus as surveying what's going on in Jerusalem. And Titus said, maybe I don't have to destroy this city if I just wait around long enough. They'll do it themselves. And to me, that has the ring of truth because that corresponds to what Chazal's statement, that it was the sinat chinam that destroyed. So I think Josephus took it in quite a literal way, but the Netziv looks at it, hashkafically, he looks at it as a certain religious triumphalism, which can sometimes poison. Because what then happens is you become hypercritical towards the other, and that gives you an excuse. And ultimately, that's really the message. The message is, all of us have flaws. All of us have faults. All of us. And we cannot really change other people, and we can't expect to be able to change other people. It's very hard to change ourselves. But our job in life is to look at ourselves with honesty and try to work on our midot and try to become kinder people, better people, people who serve Hashem with love and with reverence. And when you become the zealot, you're so outer directed towards exposing the chesronot of others that it becomes an excuse not to engage in the very difficult cheshbon hanefesh of looking into our own lives. And that is why it is also, besides all the other things I've talked about, it also diverts us from our central avoda in life. In fact, there is a medrash that says, why did God give us two eyes? One is a kind eye to look at others, and a more judgmental eye to look at ourselves. You have to be kind to yourself too, but when it comes to yourself, look at yourself, try to become a better person, be willing to be introspective. When it comes to other people, we don't have to notice all of the problems. I think I may have told you, forgive me if I'm repeating it, a famous vort from the Apter Rav, who was a Hasidic Rebbe who wrote about Ahavas Yisrael. The Sefer is called Ohev Yisrael. So he says every Parsha deals with Ahavas Yisrael. So he was asked, where in Parshas Balak do you have Ahavas Yisrael? The truth is, I don't understand the question. There are plenty, Mattos, Yaakov. But he says, no, it's very Pasha. The word Balak is a remes to Ahavas Yisrael. Why is that? Because the Vei stands for V'ahavta, the Lamed is L'reyecha, and the Kuf, Balak, Kamoch. So he said, Rebbe, that doesn't make sense. V'ahavta is with a Vav, and Kamocha is with a Chaf. He says, the point is, when you have Ahavas Yisrael, you don't pay so much attention to details. He says, that can also be. V'ahavta L'reyecha Kamoch. This is from the Afterah. So this is the idea here. And in fact, I want to point out that there's an interesting ha'ara. When Hashem said to Pinchus, Hineni nosang lo, behold, I am giving him brisi shalom, a covenant of shalom. If you look in the Chumash, look in the Sefer Torah, you'll see that the Vav is not a complete. The Vav is cut in half. Vav Ketia. It's only a partial Vav. And this is halacha Moshe Sinai. This is one, we don't have a definitive reason that this is, in the Sefer Torah you sometimes have big letters, small letters, missing letters, right? The Torah has instructions as to how you write it. So we don't necessarily have a conclusive explanation. But one of the explanations that is given, the Derech Drush, is that the peace that you get through violence and zealousness will never be a complete peace. It'll be peace, but it's not complete. It's katua. It is defective. And in fact, there's a passage in the Rambam. Now, the political implications are quite interesting, and I don't know exactly how to draw the political implications. Let me just give you a comment of the Rambam in the Moreh Nevuchim. Just a comment, and then you can think about it, what it might mean. I don't even know. The Rambam addresses the question that at the end of Sefer Shmuel, David HaMelech purchases the Har HaBayit from a non-Jewish owner, Aravna HaYevusi, the Jebusites, and he purchases it with money that is collected from every Shevet. So everybody has an equal share. And the question becomes, David HaMelech had conquered, he had completed the conquest of Yerushalayim. So what does he have to negotiate? He owns it. Right? He's the government. He owns it. What is the need to purchase? So the Rambam says, although Yerushalayim was acquired by military conquest, the makom of the Hashrat HaShekhinah, the place where the divine presence rests, cannot be acquired by war and by military struggle. It must be acquired by negotiation and consensual purchase. This is what the Rambam says, because the same idea that David could not build the Beis HaMikdash because he was a man of war extends it one step further, that the etzem ownership of the Har Habayis has to come through a consensual process, as the Messianic vision indeed describes it. Ki beisi beis tefillah yikareh l'chol ha'amim. That Temple Mount will be the house of prayer for all of the nations of the world. What are the implications? I mean, obviously, we own the Har Habayis to the extent that we own it. The question. In fact, it's an interesting thing. I saw a headline today. I was curious. It says, Jews went onto the Har Habayis without a Muslim escort. It sounded good to me. Well, other than the halachic issues, I don't know, but And I read that because of the disciplinary sanctions, because of the last event last Friday, so the Muslims are boycotting the Temple Mount. I thought that's fantastic news. They're boycotting. Halvai, keep up the boycott. So they're not there. Okay, Baruch Hashem. So obviously, we conquered it we reclaimed it. We reclaimed it in the 6-day war. But it seems, according to the Rambam, that we're not ready to build a Beit HaMikdash till even the Umot HaOlam acknowledge that this is the house of God. So I think that's, like the Rambam, that's a bit of at least a hashkafic argument why we are not yet ready to build the Beit HaMikdash, because it's not yet ready for Asras HaShechinah till there is Shalom. So again, I don't want to draw any definite conclusions, but it's a very, very interesting Rambam that David HaMelech had to buy the Temple Mount. It could not be acquired, so to speak, by Milchama.
Isn't that a declaration in favor of the importance of the sanctity of private property? That's the same principle by which we destroyed the houses on the presumed Arab land in the settlement of Ammona.
Yes, so that's not the Rambam's point. That is a different point, which might be another possible reading. That in spite of the fact that we acquired something by military conquest, if property was privately owned by an individual, we do not take that property. That's another reading. That would not be unique to the Temple Mount. That would apply to anything. Okay, that is a possible interpretation. That's not the one the Rambam uses, though. The Rambam uses a special rule regarding the sanctity of the temple. Yeah.
Is it the same idea as the Rambam puts there, buying Ma'arat HaMachpelah and the Shem, these areas, these places were purchased, each of them, one by Avraham Avinu and the other by Yaakov Avinu.
That's right.
And they say these are the only 3 places in Israel which were actually definitely purchased, being definitely titled. These are the most contentious places.
Yes, so that's another medrash. Again, that's not the Rambam, but you are correct. There is a medrash that Hashem knew that these would be the 3 areas in which our ownership would be most contested, and therefore we established it by legitimate purchase and not by milchama. Yeah, that is a medrash. Of course, as you know, when UNESCO said that Hebron is not a Jewish, I mean, the absurdity, you read something like that, you say, who on earth is going to take it seriously? But it is very unfortunate that people take it seriously. There are people who believe this stuff, as hard as it is, as ludicrous as it is to even contemplate. We have no connection to Temple Mount, we have no connection to Hebron. So Hitler's point about the big lie, sometimes the lie can be so outrageous that people assume it got to be true, otherwise nobody would say it. There's some validity to that.
If they end up by denying our connection to these historical sites, then perhaps at least they'll come around to the view that it was the Muslims that killed Jesus, which would be ultimately in our favor.
Let's do that. Yeah, well, okay. If you want to go all the way, you might as well. Okay. Anyway, I want to wish you all a good Shabbat and a good week, and we'll see you.